Here are the directions for Part 2. In this part, you will hear 5 passages, A through E. Each passage will be followed by 2 questions, number 11 through number 20. For each question, you will have 10 seconds to choose the best answer and mark your answer on your answer sheet. The passage and the questions will be given only once. Now, let's begin.
A. Renewable energy sources. If you were to travel around Denmark, you might well see many huge wind turbines, with their blades whirling round, rather like giant windmills. Denmark is the world's leading wind power nation, and the Danes like using it because they think it suits their country and their lifestyle. So what are its prospects? On one hand, because the Earth's oil and gas resources are finite, few people would seriously argue that we can go on as we are. A considerable number of energy specialists also point to the relatively minimal investment that would be required to change to renewable energy sources like wind and solar power. Enormous changes, however, would be needed to people's lifestyles. Wind power may be socially acceptable in a flat and bicycle-friendly country like Denmark. However, the scale of the effort that would be needed in nations where people rely heavily on the automobile is unimaginably greater. It is possible that one day there will be a major shift toward greater reliance on renewable energy sources such as wind power, but the power of inertia and people's reluctance to change their ways is very strong. Perhaps we shouldn't bet too heavily on major changes in the immediate future.
Questions. Number 11. Why do the Danish people like using wind power? Number 12. What is the major obstacle to greater use of wind power? B. Healthcare rationing. In wartime, food items such as eggs and butter were in short supply, so they had to be rationed. People were only allowed certain amounts because the demand exceeded the supply. This is a basic law of economics. Recently, the application of this law to healthcare, restricting the demand to match the supply, has become a widely debated topic. Why has this debate erupted now? In principle, there is nothing new about healthcare rationing. Doctors have long made judgments about whether a particular treatment is appropriate or justified. But previously, their decisions were made behind closed doors. Recently, however, thanks to the Internet, people have become more aware of what choices are available. At the same time, medical technology is rapidly developing so that previously incurable conditions can be treated at a price. And this is the core of the problem. If the possibilities of treatment have expanded, one answer is to increase the budget for health care. But if this cannot be done, then the alternative is to restrict the demand. Given the speed at which the average age of Japan's population is increasing, it will not be long before Japan, too, will be faced with difficult choices about who gets what sort of drugs or treatment.
Questions. Number 13. What is the main reason the debate about healthcare rationing has erupted now? Number 14. What will Japan likely have to do in the future?
C. War against hedgehogs. In a group of islands off the coast of Scotland, a drama is being played out. In 1973, a resident on one of the islands brought in 7 hedgehogs to try to keep down the slugs and other pests in his garden. Unfortunately, some of the hedgehogs escaped. To their delight, they found that they could breed freely and had a plentiful supply of birds' eggs. 30 years later, the number of hedgehogs had increased to an estimated 4,000, and the birds whose eggs formed the hedgehog's main food supply were in danger of extinction. So the authorities decided that some hedgehogs had to be killed, and in 2003, 66 hedgehogs were got rid of, at an estimated cost of £1,500 per hedgehog. But by this time, the British Hedgehog Preservation Society had stepped in. Protesting against the killing of hedgehogs, which were on the decline in the rest of Britain, members of the society formed a group of volunteers to go to the islands and try to save the hedgehogs and transfer them to the mainland. So 2 groups are now involved, one group trying to kill the hedgehogs and one group trying to save them. The drama continues, and it's anyone's guess who will win.
Questions. Number 15. Why did the authorities decide to kill the hedgehogs? Number 16. What does the speaker think will likely be the result? D. Land ownership and planning control. In Britain, the fact that you own a house doesn't mean that you can do what you like with it. Comprehensive legislation over land use, including all types of buildings, dates back to 1947, and the period since then has seen a steady increase in government control. In practice, this means that all types of construction and alterations are subject to very strict controls. It's always necessary to submit a planning application, and when deciding whether or not to approve it, the authorities will look closely not only at the proposed building, but at the whole neighborhood. So, for example, they will look at the color and design of nearby houses to see if your design matches with them, or at the number of existing shops to see if a new supermarket is really needed, and so on. Of course, there are disputes, but in general, most people accept the system, and it does have some very pleasing results. For example, urban sprawl is largely non-existent because building in the countryside surrounding towns, the green belts, is forbidden, so you can travel for many kilometers through green fields filled with sheep and cows.
Questions. Number 17. What is a result of the current building standards in Britain? Number 18. Why is building in the countryside around towns forbidden in Britain? E. One-man protest. On June 2, 2001, Brian Haw began a one-man protest in Parliament Square in London, in front of the Houses of Parliament. Initially, Haw was protesting against British government support for sanctions against Iraq, but later he extended his target to include the UK's involvement in the Iraq invasion and its aftermath. Described as a committed Christian with a passion for peace and human rights, Haw sleeps in Parliament Square, and over the years has built up a large and highly visible display of anti-war banners and placards, many of which have been presented by well-wishers. On the other hand, a number of members of Parliament have complained that the noise from the megaphone that Haw uses disrupts their work, and several attempts have been made to remove him. In spring 2005, the UK Parliament even brought in a new law designed to prevent Haw and other demonstrators from protesting outside the Parliament building. Unfortunately for them, they overlooked the fact that the law was drafted in such a way as to prevent demonstrations starting after August 2005. Since Haw had been demonstrating since 2001, the judges found that the legislation did not apply to him, and he vowed to continue his demonstration for as long as it takes.
Questions. Number 19. Why did British members of Parliament complain about Hawes' demonstration? Number 20. Why did the law that Parliament passed not apply to Haw?